of Executive Edge. I'm David Welsh, your host, and we're very happy today to have with us Fred Schaufeld. Fred is an entrepreneur, a venture capital investor, a sports team owner, and a philanthropist. He's also an alum of the university. Well, Fred, it's great to have you back here at the university. I want to thank you for taking the time to be with us.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be back here.
Great. So tell me a little bit about your journey, kind of where it started at Lehigh University, what you did as an entrepreneur, and what you're doing today.
Lehigh is a very entrepreneurial school. I started, however, in the Arts and Science College. I was a government major. And my first real entrepreneurial journey happened with an election in the school. There used to be concert chairman, and the person who ran all the concerts that were booked in Stable Arena and Grace Hall and Packard Lab back then was a student.
Wow.
And in that school-wide election, I got the ability to run these businesses that would, I think was pretty close to 20 in all shows that we did in my senior year.
Wow.
Incredible amount. And I'm pretty close to the numbers there that were entire life cycles of businesses from the time you conceived of having an act and you had to make projections and bid on this act to bring them there, to 6 weeks or so of advertising and everything else you did. And from the time they did the first strum of the guitar, you were never going to get another penny. And I gained a lot of business confidence because I had to do business things, really representing the school, and got to work with some really bright people here. And that gave me the bug. It gave me the business bug.
How did you get into, because I know you founded NEW.
Yep.
And how did you start that? Where did that come from? From entertainment into...
It started by accident. Originally, I thought I was going to go to law school. I did go to law school, but ultimately left in good standing before I graduated. And I was going at night, and I had to pay for it. And I answered an ad in the Washington Post for a company that sold warranty programs to car dealers in the Washington area. And these got big because there was an oil crisis in the 70s, and the number of cars that were sold by dealers went down, actually shrunk. And the difference between dealers who survived and didn't survive are ones who could sell this type of product. But the company I was working for, and the concept had legs. It had popularity with consumers. It was a high margin product from the dealer's perspective. But the company that I was working for, they had a little problem. They weren't handing over all the money to the ultimate insurer, who was supposed to be underwriting all of these contracts. But this insurance company and I pulled together kind of a contingent reserve business where we were going to cover the car dealers who I was doing business with. And at the same time, I realized that I could do this middleman's job. I didn't need this middleman. They weren't adding any value. Actually, they were taking money away.
Right. And
I could do it in an industry that looked like it was about to parallel the car industry, and that was the consumer products industry.
Wow.
Microwave ovens and VCRs, they were growing like that. It was an incredible growth cycle.
This is the 80s?
In the 80s,
right.
And it was clear that they were going to flatten out the same way the cars' sales flattened out, and this was going to become a very important product. And nobody who was in that industry had a legitimately insured warranty plan to put out there, with the exception of me. And I did it on the balance sheet of the original insurance company I was doing business with. So they were handling the claims originally, and I was doing the marketing because I learned how to do marketing through the concerts at Lehigh.
So it was sort of like all of these things that you were interested in and building. You got the marketing from the music industry in the beginning stages during school. And you saw this pattern of basically a life cycle. As things matured, they needed to add on warranties and different things. And you kind of recognized that in another industry and then applied that same methodology. And that's how NEW was formed?
That's how NEW was formed. It was $79 my original investment, which is what it cost to incorporate in Delaware. Again, utilizing the balance sheet of an insurance company, gaining knowledge with a little bit of baptism by fire, working for the worst of the worst.
Sure.
But understanding the way it should be.
So you saw kind of the good things and the bad things, and you decided when you started this company, you wanted to do right by the consumer, build a company that was, sound as well from inside and out.
I thought it would be, we were really taking a longer view of things. I thought that it would work out. And I saw where it worked and failed in this other industry. So I was really again, seeing this opportunity, moving it over from one vertical to another.
Yeah.
And it was a real opportunity to be, really the first one in,
Yeah.
and to kind of define the way that was going to go. But it was luck.
Wow. A lot of people say that, but I think, luck is, where opportunity meets skill. And
Sure.
I think when you were able to identify an opportunity, you had the skill, you saw what you wanted to do. So tell me a little bit about how you actually built NEW.
I started in my studio apartment right next to my Murphy bed. That was the office, and I was the only employee. One of the people who I hired came from this company, Progressive Insurance, who was a tiny insurance company at the time, and obviously they're a big company now.
Right.
The way they became a big company was by observing their own customers differently than anybody else observed their customers. And they figured out things that nobody else could see about their customers. They saw patterns that nobody else saw. And we started observing our customers the way they did. And we found that the industry orthodox beliefs were wrong. Were just dead wrong. The industry thought people bought these products because of straight up indemnity, of fear of financial loss. That was part of the reason why they bought it. But the bigger part of the reason why they bought it, for most of the people who are early adopters of expensive electronics, was just out of convenience. They wanted stuff done fast, and they wanted an organization that would be very predictable and hassle-free, and the financials of it didn't matter quite as much. So we built an organization to make things super fast, hassle-free, and we gave less time to a customer in terms of the length of coverage that we were doing than anybody else. But we also charged the smallest margins, and we got the highest velocity. So we went from myself in the studio apartment to ultimately we had 6,000 employees when we merged with Asurion in 2008. So it
From 1 to 6,000.
it grew a lot. I thought initially that I had a really compelling proposition that retailers were going to kind of fall all over themselves to sign up with me relative to everything else in the industry, because I was the only one providing a legitimate A+ rated insurance company to do this product, which was becoming a very important product for them. The reality was I couldn't get the relationships, I couldn't even get in the door to talk to the retailers unless I would find somebody to hire who knew the retailer, who was the brother-in-law of the retailer.
Right.
And with the small retailers, it was very hard to get in the door. Interestingly enough, the growing mass merchants, the companies like Walmart and Kmart, Best Buy, were more professional. You could go in the front door more. They tended to have in their buying offices younger people that didn't have these long-term relationships with that would maybe go back decades with
Right.
distributors. And they became easier clients for me, and they ultimately became the ones that really took over that world. So that was, again, I'd say, you can call it a lucky break or whatever, but that benefited us a lot.
So as you continue to grow, and we talk a little bit about leadership, how did you build after your first sort of 5 to 6 hires, and was there any thought and vision in that, or was it just getting everybody kind of on board, understanding your vision and your culture?
My original vision lasted us about a year or two. And I had to keep reinventing that vision. And luckily, I would meet people along the way. I think the job of HR, of hiring, is a constant job. You're always meeting people.
Right.
And usually, I didn't have to go to a headhunter when I needed to bring somebody in, because I would set out to find who were the best of the best.
Mm.
We brought in an HR department when we were about 30 people, and that was very, very valuable. But the recruiting task, I always thought, really belonged to the managers in a particular department. They had to start knowing who their competitors were in the industry, or look outside of their industry, because we didn't have any models ahead of us. But what we did have is we were able to segment this business apart by the functions that we were doing, and find other companies that were doing things like the segments of what we were doing, and build from that. The vision got reinvented every couple of years. Even as we were selling the company, I really never, over any 5-year period, understood how big something would be. I really never wanted to take the chances, because there were so many things that could go wrong with concentration of revenues and things like that. to have every egg in one basket over a long-term period. So I look for the types of projects that within about a 2-year time frame, we would get a payback, and expected to better than that from our people.
On the VC side, if you were to look at a small company, do you look at the leadership, just the financials? What are some, for young entrepreneurs out there would maybe looking at this and think, if I'm going to start a company, these are the couple things I would like to focus on because of investors like you?
Management is absolutely critical from my perspective. They've got to be honest, ethical, smart. They've got to know their limitations. They've got to be able to keep their ego in check. And they've got to have an ego about it. I want people who really want to win and dominate markets. The numbers are important, but they're mostly pro forma. What I look for is, we're looking at projections, but they have to be real. And I understand that people are going to redefine those businesses, as I had to redefine my business many times. And I want to have the team that's going to have the strength to see the issues, to anticipate the issues, and to react to them. And to, when they make a mistake, be the first to bring it up, the first to find it, not to bury it under the rug. That's a common character flaw that you see. And then I also want a company that is going after an industry where they're going to be able to stay ahead of the competition, especially when their competition may end up being really big, well-capitalized companies. How are you going to stay a year ahead of it? I also look for, right when I'm going in, at least in my head, what's the exit going to be? Is it going to be one of those great big companies that buys it? Do we think this could potentially be a public company? And why do we like a particular exit? I like things that have multiple ways to win, multiple exits. But I'm having more fun now, I think, business-wise than I've ever had. I'm a lot of times I actually know what I'm talking about. There's pattern recognition that I have, but sometimes I don't, and I'm still learning from people who I respect. I like being around smart people. I like engaging conversations. I love listening to young people and see what's coming up next and being open-minded enough, to understand that this thing Twitch that I never heard of before, or, e-gaming, or, so many other things, or methods of buying, from a generation who sees everything through a mobile phone. How those come together are fascinating to me, and they're fun.
Tell me a little bit about what interests you personally. What do you like to do? I know you're involved in some sports teams and some other things, so.
In sports and entertainment, something I learned at Lehigh originally, and sports is entertainment when it really comes down to it. I get to be very involved, particularly in our entertainment companies. A lot of the things on the platform level of these companies, they may have tremendous talent at levels that I couldn't possibly imagine. But they still need to have real estate and accounting departments. They need to have an HR department. They need to have meetings. They need to have processes and trust between people. The same thing that a company selling sprockets would need. And when you're able to add that into a company, you become a really trusted member, and then you learn all about the business, and then you're going to the Academy Awards. And
you're in movies and film as well as sports and VC. Well, that's an interesting life. I mean, and I think a lot of that comes, again, we talked about the pattern recognition and being engaged, but not just in, it's business, but it's in life. I mean, really, when you think about it, you're kind of immersed in, like the philanthropy, you're giving back, and as a business owner, and somebody that invests in companies, because at some point, like you had said, maybe you should have taken money on earlier, but now you're in that seat. You're able to kind of look at companies and identify this is the next big thing, and help them.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, I don't know if I can identify the next big thing, but a pretty good idea that's really executed well has a much better chance of becoming a big business than a great idea which is poorly executed, that people give up on.
Well, I have to say, I think we're the luckiest people today because we were able to have you back here on campus. Thanks again, Fred. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.